What is up, my double clutchers? So a little history lesson in double clutch productions is the very first hobby grade RC that I ever had as a young adult was an SCX10 Honcho. And a really good friend of mine kind of got me into crawling and kind of guided me through the path on what to get and kind of showed me how to build bodies and paint and do a lot of that hobby stuff. So that original crawler, which I'll roll some footage in right here, was the original reason why we actually got into doing scale videos for RC. And I really kick myself every time I think about that I didn't document the process of building that truck. And that was an original SCX10 Honcho with a Tamiya Hilux body and a blinky RC interior and just kind of mismatched and hodgepodge with a light kit. I took the original Honcho truggy cage and cut it, shrunk it, and then remounted it farther up on the chassis. We had just done a bunch of cool kind of, rookie modifications. It was stock suspension, stock springs, pretty much stock everything, stock drivetrain. It had a Plastidip servo so that it would be waterproof. And we took those things in the creek, and I had some of the great times with some good friends just crawling and building those things. So once we got Double Clutch Productions fired back up, one of the first things that I got was actually this hard body 110 scale Ford Bronco. And one of the things that I thought was really cool about that old Tamiya crawler that I built on the Honcho chassis was that it was a hard body and that I had functioning lights and it had a functional interior. So one of my goals has always been to kind of rebuild a scale crawler truck to my liking, and I think I'm going to take you guys along for the ride while we do that, so stay tuned. One of the things that we did pick up is one of these Proline Pro Crawler interiors. I think it's a PLC, which I'll have the link to this down in the description. And we're gonna basically just do a rough trim on this and see if we can get this interior set to work on both bodies. And here it is. Here's the Cherokee we ended up picking up. So this came stock as an RTR from A-Main Hobbies. They got this to me in about 2 days in Northern California, so it was extremely fast shipping. One of the reasons why we didn't pick up one of the 3rd gen crawlers is that I got this a couple months back, and at that time we had some kind of weird stock levels going on, so we kind of just picked this up. I did have a gift certificate to A-Main that we kind of used at the same time, so we made it happen. It's definitely not the first choice, but I'm pretty stoked to actually be able to have another SCX10 in the house. It's a chassis that I'm not really crazy familiar with because I didn't work on mine too much. I just kind of bashed on it, so it's going to be cool to take you guys through the process of how we're going to build this thing up. So I think some of the first order of business is probably going to be doing the spring swap. So we're going to take the front springs and swap those to the rear and take the rears and swap them to the front, while also probably flipping the shock towers and the shock mount locations in the rear and trying to figure out some of the geometry. So I got the front shocks. I just marked them with one of my little paint pens with little gold sections. So I was swapping the springs from the front to the rear, doing the old spring swap, and I was just noticing that this one's already leaking silicone oil, and that's how much rebound they have programmed this. And it's a substantial amount of rebound, where this width spring rate probably is limiting articulation. And this is probably one of the better ones because it doesn't have as much fluid. But then this one, same thing. And every single shock that I seen was built with a bunch of rebound. And maybe some of these crawler guys can tell me, but there's so much rebound built into this that I'm telling you, it's gonna be limiting its ability. I mean, once we get to like right here, it's almost like there's a spring on the inside. It's air. I feel like it's air pushing back. So to me, this is an overfilled shock, and springs are supposed to develop ride heights. And I don't want anything pushing, boom, and having rebound. I don't want to drive this tire in the ground. I just want it to go as free as possible with 0 rebound. And then these are the rears, and the same thing. So they all got this crazy amount of rebound. Like once you get to about right there, it's like, it's half the throw. So we're gonna try to rebuild these shocks and see. So I have no idea what kind of oil's in here, but seems to be running pretty good. I don't know, it seems kind of like thick oil. What I'm trying to avoid right now is actually taking off this rod end, because some of the old Axial stuff, as soon as you remove this, it's likely, I mean, I might have some spares in there, but so for the sake of not taking that apart, let's see if we can coax this O-ring out of there without tearing it up. Now that I got that O-ring coaxed out of there, I'm gonna hit this little butt in here with some shot grease and then a little bit on the back side before I put the cap on. So I have no idea any bass lines to go off of, but we're just gonna take some of this TLR, fill it with some 25 weight. Alright, and we're back after a little while. We filled these up with some 25 weight. And now I'm gonna attempt to learn how to get oil out of these things enough to where they don't rebound. So what I think we're gonna do is run a Q-tip to pull some of the oil out as I run the shaft up, instead of purging it out of the hole. So we'll just start by running the shaft up. I'm gonna start pulling some of this oil out. Then we'll run the shaft back up a little bit more. That's a little bit better. So we're almost all the way and it's almost flush. I just don't know how much this is gonna give kickback. So I am gonna take a little bit more. Yeah, I can almost see the piston right there. I'm gonna grab the top. Maybe I'm overthinking this too much, but I mean, there's gonna be almost no fluid in this thing. What a pain in the butt. I've been building these for a couple of minutes now. I mean, how does the... So we straight up couldn't get the first one. So I just refilled it, set it, kind of cleaned off the rim, and then I'm gonna attempt to do this next one. So I think I got definitely too much oil in there. Kind of looking in there. There's a little nook for the piston, but pretty much everywhere else is flat. And it looks to be flush with the cup, so pretty much we're gonna need to run this piston all the way up to the top and then try to wipe off any excess. So I guess here's my dilemma, is that when I took these shocks off, they had huge amounts of hydro lock where they wouldn't actually compress all the way. And in theory, I mean, if we're trying to crawl, the idea is I want to be able to compress the shocks as much as possible and have them as free as possible. So when I rebuild these shocks, when they don't have any rebound or hydro lock, they end up sucking the shaft back in at full extension. So I'm just going to try to rebuild them again and see what we can do here. There we go. That's a lot better. There we go. That's a lot better. I'm gonna try to duplicate that 3 times, and I'll see you guys in about 2 days, because that was just stupidly a pain in the butt. Alright, let's see if we can do it again. So I was able to actually get 2 with matching stroke and matching rebound and not all hydro locked out. So I'm gonna try to use those techniques on the next 2 shocks and then share with you guys kind of how I was getting that done. So I got the shaft. It's still almost all the way out, but I'm gonna start running the shaft up, and then you'll see it'll kind of bulbous. The fluid will kind of bulbous out a little bit. You can see right there it's domed. And I'll pull the fluid back down. So you can see that it's doming up a little bit. So, and this is about how far the shaft is. So I'm gonna go about halfway up so it's domed. Grab my Q-tip. And I'm just gonna kind of set it in there. And just kind of drag enough fluid off so that it's flush again, maybe even a little concave. And then I'm going to continue to run the shaft up. And what I think is going on is that the top of the piston, the little C-clip channel, actually rides up above the shaft and into the body of the collar. So what I'm trying to do is simulate right before that starts to protrude to the top. And what I'll do is I'll actually protrude it so you can see. So you should be able to see that little bit of that C-clip right there at the top. So I don't want that, I want that flush, and I want the oil level, which leaves me with about this far on the shaft. You can see a little bit of dome. So I'm gonna take the other side of my Q-tip and I'm just gonna barely just grab a little bit. And it's a little bit concave. That's fine, because now what we're gonna do Just take up that little bit of concave action. You can kind of see it in the back. Is I'm gonna raise the piston just enough so it's flat at the cap. And as we tighten up the shock cap, the shaft won't extend from being hydrolocked. If you haven't done it right, the shaft will pop down. So I believe that we did this one correct. See? Perfect. And that should match these other shocks when we compress them fully. They have the exact same rebound setting. So I'm very happy with that. So we're gonna try that same technique on the next one, and if that works, then that's how I'm gonna rebuild them on the next shot. You can see that the fluid is bulbing up. And I definitely overfilled them. I think you could probably get away with this by not doing this, by just not overfilling them. So I'm just gonna drag some of this fluid off, run the shaft up some more. You can see we're close. And then what I want to do is I want to set the shaft at the proper height, which is right about there, right before the C-clip peaks over the top, and then I want this to be flush. That looks pretty good. And with this sitting flush, let's see if I can get our cap on and have it not shoot the shaft out. That's what she said. And there we go. Well, I don't know if that's correct, but that is definitely how we're gonna do it. Oh, nope, this one's a little hydro-locked, look. See, that one's pushing out a little more. So, we're gonna bust it again. I'm gonna run this up. And there we go, we got 4 shocks built. We used some of that O-ring grease, hopefully that'll keep them from leaking. We got all of them set with the 0 rebound, or minimum rebound, and we're gonna run them. Hopefully they won't leak on us. So I just went into the Baja Ray screw kit and actually found these little screws right here, and we are gonna add these to the bottom to keep those bottom spring cups in place. All right, so we got the shocks fully rebuilt, and I got the front springs on the rear, or basically just, you know, swap the shocks because we are running the same weight oils. So we're gonna get these back on the truck and then get on to the next step. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna see if we can flip these brackets around while still maintaining the same body mount position so that we can get a little bit of rake on these rear shocks. So what I think I'm gonna do is, this is the factory location for the body mount post, and I'm gonna line that up with this hole on the frame rail right here coming up. So this post lines up exactly with this hole. And as long as I maintain that factory hole by flipping that around, I can still maintain the body post in the same location and then get a little bit of rake on the rear shocks. And then all we did was just slide that bracket forward so that it lines up. So on the factory, this shock was mounted straight up and down, and we swapped the heavier rate spring to the rear. And by canting this forward, we're actually putting a little bit more leverage on this shock, and it'll simulate a lighter spring. And we're gonna be moving to the most forward hole to gain a little bit more angle. And here we go. We got those linkages mounted up forward, so now we got a little bit of rake on these rear shocks with those medium weight springs, and then we got the soft springs up front. And we still maintain our factory body mounting locations, which I think is pretty cool. And even though we got that good angle on the shocks, we still maintain the factory body mount locations. And one of the goals with this project is that I want to maintain the factory body mounts between the Bronco body and the Cherokee body so that we can have a basher body and then kind of like a nice body. So moving on to the next step, looking pretty good. And we picked up a GRC inner fender kit that I have yet to kind of really check out yet. So we're gonna bust this out, see what we got in here. So it's from grcracing.com, and this is their front mudguard and rear mudguard set with the inner fenders. So there's kind of a look, and I have no idea the quality of this, the fitment or anything, so I just kind of got this on a whim. It was cheap, it was on sale, and we're gonna try to install this onto our SCX10 and then see how much we got to cut and chop to make both of the bodies work. So so far these are a super high quality injection molded part with some pretty good extreme detail up inside this fender well. So far, dude, they look really good. We'll see how they fit. These things fit good. I'm pretty impressed so far just with the way the molding is. So let's check it out. Now, because we moved this frame rail piece, I'm actually gonna have to probably do a little bit of cutting in here. Gosh, I hate to be that guy that just always gets brand new stuff and just starts, you know, straight full on chop cut. Snap it out of there. But so a smart person probably would have tried to install these first before, you know, changing extreme geometry in here, but I knew that this was going to be a big deal, so I just didn't know that we moved it this far. There we go. So that snaps in like that, and then this gives us the spacing of where this fender's supposed to sit. So as I get this set, and I'm like, all right, this is going to go back here, and I'm like, okay, this screw hole is going to go into here. But then, geez, I mean, we're utilizing the screw hole that this fender was intended to go through for the new shock placement. So I had to get up in here and do a lot of trimming, and we actually did lose one of the mounting points for one of these inner fenders. It actually utilized this hole right here, but we're using that for the shock tower. So I think I'm gonna actually bust out a drill bit and drill into the frame rail right here and do 2 mounting brackets, and then maybe figure out a zip tie to utilize through here. So here's a pretty crazy reference of how much I had to cut out of there to actually accommodate it. But so the one on the left is the one that I actually trimmed, and the one on the right is untrimmed. So eventually I'm gonna have to open them up so that they match. And here's an update on the crawler. So we did get these inner fenders mounted up. We had to do some pretty aggressive trimming on both sides to get these to work, but it definitely worked. And just from running these shock hoops so far forward to get this shock angle, we ended up losing one of the mounting brackets right here. So we just took a drill, busted into the frame rail, and added a little piece of hardware. And then I just have a lock nut on the other side right here. So yeah, I think adding that hardware will work, and if we need to, we'll throw in a little zip tie to get this, but it seems to be pretty tied into there. Another thing that we did is I ended up cutting the section out so it would actually make room, so I didn't want to move the ESC too much. I just wanted to kind of leave it in the stock location. And everything else looks really, really good. So yeah, we got the fenders all buttoned up, we got the shocks rebuilt, got the angles changed, a little geometry change, we got our battery mounted up with the spacers, and we're gonna be moving on to the next step. Looking pretty good.